Hi, I'm Alex Elle, and I write books for a living. The Hey Girl podcast was created with sisterhood and storytelling in mind. Hey girl.
Hey girl.
Hey girl.
Hey girl.
I'll be sitting down with some phenomenal women to discuss love.
I believe we grew distant out of love of some type, like,
Yeah.
I don't want to hurt you.
Loss.
Really don't know what's going to trigger that feeling
Right.
of grief in any moment.
And a topic very important to my work, self-care.
I'm holding on to this self-care with every ounce of me.
Join us as we journey through sharing together. A lot of these conversations are pretty private, and these women are courageous and vulnerable and transparent, and that alone shows us that we're not alone in our struggle. This week's guest is designer, writer, artist, Denisio Truitt. I've known Denisio for about 6 years. Denisio's story is phenomenal because she literally has transformed since I've known her. I wanted to talk to Denisio about her journey through entrepreneurship, her journey through one marriage, through a divorce, and then remarrying the love of her life and relocating to New Orleans. I also wanted to talk to her about being a queer Black woman in a heterosexual interracial relationship. I think there's more women in the world like Denisio than we know. I pray that people find a Denisio because she is a magical woman, and I'm honored to call her my sister friend. This is Denisio's story. Hey girl, are you there?
Hey girl.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So we're really not sitting down together in the studio. You're in New Orleans and I'm here in DC. How are things in NOLA?
Things are pretty good. You know, busy as usual, but good busy. So just trying to stay on that grind.
No, yeah, I feel you. So I'm just going to jump right in because your story as a woman is just impeccably moving. I want to just kind of give the people a rundown of like how we met from your account and kind of like the shape-shifting point in our friendship. So let's start there.
Okay. Well, I believe the year was 2012.
That's so crazy. It's been a while.
It's been a while. I think we pretty much just met via social media. I was working on an event, and I think a friend of a friend asked you to help us with promotion for said event.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then I think we went to lunch shortly after that at Busboys.
And then we fell in love.
And then we just fell in love and we just hit it off. It was just like, oh, wait, like we're supposed to be really good friends.
Forever.
Yeah. It was a really natural friendship that happened, I think. And there was like this comfort kind of between us that, you know, just felt very organic and non-forced.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what it was. Like yeah.
And I was in school at the time too, so I would come and crash on your couch almost every day, like in between school, and just like eat food and like snuggle with Chloe, your dog at the time, and like it was just a good time.
Yeah, it was.
We spent a lot of time together. So during that period of time, I don't really recall, but were you still working a regular 9 to 5, or had you dove, whatever. Had you jumped into your entrepreneurship yet?
I hadn't quite yet. I was working with a friend of mine on a vintage venture.
Right.
But I was still working full time at GW, George Washington University, in their fundraising department. So I definitely still had the 9 to 5, was still a part of the cubicle nation, was definitely, you know, tired of it.
Yeah, I remember.
Yep. And, you know, just kind of feeling complacent and just stuck and afraid of like taking that next step. So yeah, I think when I met you, it was kind of like, here's this person like doing the things that I want to be doing in terms of just like, you know, working for yourself and kind of putting your work out there.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was really inspiring because I'd always been the creative person out of my friend group. So I didn't really have somebody to talk to about things like that. And I think that's what kind of made our friendship very special, was just the ability to kind of talk about our creative endeavors and
Yeah.
process, for that.
Yeah. Can you give, I agree with that
Mhm.
completely. That's kind of what I recall too. Can you give the listeners some background on your creativeness and maybe like, I think weren't you a fine art major in college? Like, can you give us some info on that?
Yeah. So I studied studio art and English with a concentration in creative writing.
Mm-hmm.
So I've basically been writing and doing art like as far as I can remember. I learned how to sew at a fairly early age. My grandmother was actually a seamstress and had like her own boutique in Liberia. My mom's family is originally from West Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mom sews as well. And so growing up, like, I'd always like kind of go into my mother's closets and like find old clothes she didn't wear and like cut them up and try to make outfits out of them and stuff. And,
Yeah.
she wasn't too much of a fan of that. Some of the clothes were actually brand new. But yeah, as far as I can remember, like I've always just been interested in creating and expressing myself through my creativity, whether it's my writing or artwork or clothing. So yeah, doing the artwork thing and writing in college. And when I graduated, I started getting a little bit more into like designing clothes.
Mm-hmm.
It actually started out, funnily enough, with making dolls and making clothes for the dolls.
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, yeah. So I had like kind of a little fine arts company that I had started, just trying to get my artwork out there, with not too much success. And so the idea came to me of, potentially selling my artwork on t-shirts, and maybe that would be kind of an easier avenue for me to like kind of sell my artwork without, the big artwork price,
Right, right,
like a $30 t-shirt versus like a, $500,000 painting.
right.
So yeah, that's pretty much how Dope Society started.
Yeah, I wanted
As
to
just,
jump into
yeah.
that and into that. So Dope Society is your brand. So what I remember most about Dope Society is I remember coming upstairs at your old house and you were showing me how you were creating your masks that are on the shirt, that are on your
Yeah.
most popular shirt. And I was floored. Like, how is this even real life? So let's fast forward from GW and jump into when you decided you were going to work for yourself and how Dope Society really kind of came about in the midst of a divorce you were going through.
Yeah. So it's crazy to think, because when I think a couple days ago, I actually thought back to that time period, Alex, and
Yeah.
I realized that all of that happened in the same year.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking this happened in like multiple years, and like I thought of Dope Society and then I quit like it all happened in like a span of a few
It
months,
happened really
which
fast.
really fast. So I had started Dope Society in May, I believe April or May of 2013.
Mm-hmm.
I quit my job in July of 2013,
Mm-hmm.
a few months afterwards. And it had been a long time coming. I had been in the same job for 7 years, 7 or 8 years,
Mm-hmm.
same place,
Mm-hmm.
every single day. And it really it wasn't a thought out plan. It was kind of this feeling that I had had enough and that I couldn't keep waking up crying before I go to work every day because I didn't want to, be in that space and be
Right.
doing this stuff.
Right.
I'd always just in the back of my mind had this just incessant need to create and to like express myself through creativity and to like make art. And it never went away. And so I quit my job, which at the time I was married and to somebody else, not
Mm-hmm.
my current husband.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He wasn't really with it, but it was still a decision that I had to make, and I knew I had to do it. And I was glad I did, even though it was very hard. I didn't really have much to fall back on, and other than Dope Society, which was just this fledgling company that was
Yeah.
just starting.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was hard. It was hard. And yeah, about a few months after that, I decided to get a divorce.
Yeah. So I remember that time really
Yeah.
vividly.
Hmm.
I remember, I think we had been friends for about a year up at that point, and I remember your ex-husband like really not being here for your creative endeavors and also just really not being nice to you. And I kind of want to talk about that,
Sure.
just how you worked and walked through that at such a pivotal time in your life as far as quitting your job and really diving into your creativity, and then having your marriage crumble beneath you.
Yeah.
And I also want to talk a little bit about the emotional side of that, as far as the emotional abuse that went along with what you were dealing with while trying to be a creative person.
With the marriage, I think, if I'm very honest with myself, the marriage had been crumbling for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was much like, staying at the same job for so long. It was this fear of the unknown and this fear of like having to re-identify myself or start over again that was more frightening to me than staying in this very extremely dysfunctional relationship. I think we were both very young when we got married, and we were both very, creative and artistic. And I think that was the person that I fell in love with. And as we grew together, I think we became very different people.
Yeah.
Him more so than me. I think in a sense, because I kind of stuck to that like artistic side of me and like wanting to work for myself and wanting to make art, and I never really let go of that.
Right.
I think in his mind he was hoping that that would be some sort of phase, right? Because I met him when I was like 19 years old,
Right.
Practically a baby. And I think for him, he would always refer to Dope Society when I started, and even before that, my other, artistic and business ventures as hobbies, and he would just always be like, well, it's a hobby, it's a hobby, it's a hobby because you're not making money. It's a hobby because you'll never be able to make money from this. You don't have the discipline for it. You can't do this, you can't do that. And the more I think about it, I don't want to say that necessarily he was jealous, but I think there was maybe some sort of subconscious kind of like envy of like me still holding on to this creative side, whereas he kind of took a different path and went the more corporate route.
Right.
So I do think there was some of that in play, like a little bit of like envy. I think also he was a very broken person,
Yeah.
which is okay because I'm a very broken person, but he wasn't ready to admit that brokenness or to acknowledge it or to, do something about it.
Right.
And so I think that just leads to a lot of resentment, and a lot of anger. And I think it just reached this point, and I think you remember this night because that was that was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And at the same time, like the best decision I ever made, which was that night that we had a pretty big fight. And I kind of looked at him and just realized at that point that like he had fallen out of love with me and I in the same thing. And just seeing like this look of like contempt on his face for me.
Wow.
And just realizing that you're never going to understand me and you don't get me.
Yeah.
And this is not going to work. And I think it was actually just Dope Society and the decision to do that full time and the decision to like quit my job.
Right.
Was like almost like the catalyst for just this like series of events that was just pushing me towards like what I needed to do and where I needed to be.
Yeah.
And so while it was like the most painful thing to go through, it was so necessary for my growth. And just, I don't know, it made me so much stronger, It felt big at the time.
Yeah.
But I never realized like how big it was and how my life would just change over the, past 2 years.
I know. I remember that day. I remember that day. And
Yeah.
I remember those weeks after that day.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember watching you like wilt and then bloom again all of a sudden. And I'm like, oh, she's back. And it was
a lot of wilting.
Oh my gosh. But it was so admirable that you didn't just cave in and give up. And we've had conversations, multiple times about how we both are trying to navigate this life. And it's just extremely admirable that you are where you are now, because I remember that time in your life and just being there with you and like trying to love on you as much as I could. And there were days where you were just like, I'm going to be at home by myself all day.
Yeah.
And like having to honor that. And I'm just really proud of you that you've worked through that. And because so many women, like, we feel like we're alone in our struggle, and we've talked about this before, and You and I and all the other women that I'm sitting down with are proof that we're never alone in our struggle, and that there's always a rainbow after the rain, even if it rains for like months.
Right.
Hey y'all, are you or someone you know about to tie the knot? Well, I just stumbled across this amazing wedding registry website called Zola. Zola is reinventing the wedding registry and planning process to make the happiest moments in your lives even happier. It's free, easy, and fun to use, and we are about to make it even easier. To sign up with Zola and receive a $50 credit towards your registry, go to zola.com/heygirl. That's ZOLA.com/heygirl. It doesn't really get much better than that. It's easy for couples to use and, of course, easy for your guest. Their friendly customer service team will go above and beyond and help your guest pick out the best blender for you, or even helping maybe your grandma who's not quite sure how to do the internet thing walk through your registry. There's a group gifting feature that allows multiple guests to contribute to those big ticket items that are on your registry. You can personalize it with photos and notes about why you're coveting certain gifts, and there's price matching and free shipping every single day. So again, if you're interested in this, if you're about to get married or know somebody who is, sign up with Zola and receive a $50 credit towards your registry. Go to zola.com/heygirl for your $50 credit. That is ZOLA.com/heygirl. So I want to talk about next, like after the divorce, your healing and like what you did to find peace. And I know that Buddhism played a part in that. I remember that.
It did.
How did you bloom again? Like, how did you find your self-care through loss?
It was a combination of things. It was kind of realizing the times that I needed to kind of be by myself and working through that. The times that I needed to go to therapy, which therapy was fantastic, and I absolutely recommend therapy to everyone. Like, I think everybody should seek out a therapist, and there's just such a variety of, therapies. It doesn't have to look like one way, you know?
Right.
I think that helped me a lot, just being able to talk about the trauma of the divorce, but also talking about the trauma of other things that, led me to be with this person for so long and led me to feel like I needed to like be attached to, this person or other people who were very similar,
Right.
I think also realizing the times when it was necessary to kind of just be with friends like you, especially. I don't think I would have been able to get through it without you, to be honest, because, you allowed me to sit there and cry and just not even say anything, but just let me bawl, or,
good old boo-hoo, we all need it.
or be angry and just like, cursing this dude out and just like, you allowed me space to do that with you. And also you would constantly tell me that I was going to get through this and reminding me of how strong I was, even when I felt like just not strong at all and just like 2 cents away from being on the street. Like just, you really...
We both, that's what we do for each other, I feel like. I feel like that's totally our relationship. Like I lean on you, you lean on me. And I remember when you moved to New Orleans and I was like, oh my God.
I know.
What am I gonna do? Because I was with you all the time. I'm like, okay, so how am I gonna like transition through this and like be happy for her that she found love again and that she's but she's leaving. Like, what the hell?
It was tough. It was tough for both of us because I had never lived in like a city where I didn't have,
somebody,
friends, Like I didn't know anybody other than the person I was living with. So that was tough.
How was that during like, because you met Mike, who's wonderful.
Yes.
Not long after your divorce. So can you can you give us details about that? And like everything moved really quickly and I remember being nervous, like shit, like she just got out of this marriage and is she rebounding? Like what's happening? But
no, rightfully so.
Yeah.
Like
But
That's the
that was
mark of a
not the
good
case.
friend.
Like, it
Yeah.
was totally like what the universe and God had waiting for you. Like, that's what it
Mm-hmm.
seemed like.
It did. It did. I think so. Basically, it was just so random. I was at the time, processing and going through this divorce, and it was very much in the early stages. I had been posting a lot on social media, specifically Instagram, kind of just reaching out and just finding other people who had been through similar experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was one post that I had posted where I was saying, like, it was just so comforting to find other women who had gone through this process, and other
Yeah.
women my age, not being too old, like I was 30 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and going through this divorce. Like, it was nice that I was connected to other women who had
Right.
been through the same thing.
Right.
And Mike had commented on one of the posts and was like, well, just so you know, you have a few male followers too that have been through the same thing.
Game.
I know. I didn't see it at the time.
I love it.
It's like, oh, that's wonderful. It's good to know. And this was crazy. So you remember when we went to Baton Rouge for your talk at Southern University together?
Yeah.
So when we were there and we were in Louisiana,
Right.
but in Baton Rouge,
Right.
I'd been thinking about like New Orleans and like how it was like, I wish we had had time to go, but it was like so far away, we couldn't drive there, whatever.
Right.
So the day after we got back from Baton Rouge, Mike had hit me up in the DMs. He slid in the DMs.
Gotta love the DMs. That's how I met
He
my
was like,
husband, in the
"Oh."
DMs.
He was like, "Oh, do you want to meet up for coffee sometime? I'm in the process of moving to New Orleans, so moving to Louisiana,
Right.
in 4 days, but I would love it if we could meet up for coffee."
I remember
And
this.
yeah, and
Yes.
he came with all the disclaimers, like, just as friends. I'm not trying to, I know you're going through something and it's very, very recent and too soon for all that. So I'm just letting you know it's just as friends.
Like,
But
I just want to
thought,
know you, and I want you to
yeah,
know I am alive and that I
right.
want to be your man, but not right now.
Not yet, not yet. So I think I switched it to like drinks. And we went out, and I mean, we had a blast, and
Yeah.
it didn't feel necessarily romantic, but it felt like, wow, we have a connection. Like,
Yeah.
we have like this really deep connection. We have a lot of things in common. And I guess visually looking at us, you wouldn't think we had so much in common, but we did. It was just this very similar sense of humor, this like, way of viewing the world, just our experiences with our divorces. Like, it was really refreshing to like talk to somebody that just like, that got it and
Yeah.
had been through it and had like come out the other side.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, I could be like this,
Yeah.
after all this happens.
Right.
So
Yeah.
after that first meetup, basically we met every subsequent day until he left. And then there hasn't been a day since that we haven't talked to each other, which is very strange to say. Like, we have not spoken to each other like ever since then.
That's me, and I mean, but that's, I feel that, because that was me
Yeah.
and Ryan. Like, it went down in the DMs, then it went off the DMs, and then it was every single day, and we're 4 years in now, and
Yes.
like when and when it feels right,
Mm-hmm.
there's no escape, there's no hiding. Like, when it feels right,
No.
it's right. And like, that made me really happy too. I was nervous at first. I'm like,
I know.
what is going on here? And then you're like, I'm moving to New Orleans, and I was like, with who? Like, what? It's like, are you sure? Like, are we doing this? And then once I met Mike, I fell in love with him too, and I'm like, oh yeah, he's
Aw.
totally Denisio's wave, and he was
Yes.
sweet to you, and he looked at you in a way that your ex-husband, I never witnessed your ex-husband look at you.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I mean, even now, like, Mike just looks at you like, oh my God, she's a goddess, and you guys have fun together, and I'm just
We
really
do.
happy that we both like found love through our heartbreak
Yes.
with two
yes.
really wonderful men. So to piggyback off of that, you guys are now in New Orleans. You've been there for what, 2 years now?
Yes. It'll be 3 years this August.
That's so crazy. That went by
I
fast.
know.
How is it being in an interracial relationship in New Orleans, being you are super pro-black, and I would say Mike is pretty pro-black too, for a white man. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
he
yeah,
honors you and respects your culture, and he's not unaware. You know, like he's
absolutely.
woke. But how is that for you being with a white man now in a place that's highly segregated? We've talked about this. And also being, you work in a very black feminist space, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
how do you navigate that with a white partner? And we've talked about this a little bit, but I kind of want to give the audience some more insight on this, just in case there's a woman out there or a man out there in the same position as you.
Absolutely. I think I navigate it as carefully as possible and with the most like respect possible. I
Okay.
think I have to constantly, it's being with somebody of a different race, and this is my first interracial relationship, so
Right. And you guys are
yeah,
married now, so it's like,
yeah.
yeah.
I think I constantly have to check myself. It's a series of constantly just checking and kind of being aware of the spaces that I inhabit
Mm.
and that we inhabit together and
Mm-hmm.
being aware of our respective privileges.
Mm.
I think what led me to be okay with dating outside of my race, because if I'm being completely honest,
Yes.
there was a time that I wasn't, and
Mm-hmm.
it just was not on the table at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think being friends with Mike first and getting to know him as a friend and him just becoming like my best friend. There's this article that I read by a black woman who was in a interracial relationship with a white man.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she kind of explained it in a way that made sense to me and kind of clicked for me, in that there's always going to be some dynamic in a relationship. And for me, as a queer woman, whether I'm with, an Asian woman who doesn't necessarily fully understand my blackness,
Mm-hmm.
or with a Black American woman who doesn't fully understand my African culture,
Mm.
or if I'm, with a Black man who doesn't necessarily understand my identifying, as a queer femme woman,
Right.
there's always going to be some sort of like privilege play in there,
Mm-hmm.
on either side. And I think you just have to like weigh, it's kind of like a scale. It's the balancing, it's the weighing with the good with the bad, or the good with the, tough.
Right. Right.
And so, not to say that it's just, a walk in the park and just like super easy, because we do have difficult conversations.
Yeah.
But I think being with a partner who's not only willing to have those difficult conversations,
Mm-hmm.
but isn't trying to challenge all the time, and
Oh,
is
yeah.
so open to listening, and, just listening and being able to take away from that, like, well, I don't know this, but I'm willing to listen. I don't necessarily understand where you're coming from in this situation, but I see that it is upsetting to you, or that, this is,
Important to
upsetting to
you.
other
Or
people.
right. Right. Right.
I think that's important.
Right.
But that's not to say that like it's not something that we work on, but it's not any different than any other aspect of relationship that we would have to constantly work on. And I do, everybody says that about their partner, but I do happen to be very lucky to be with a man who is very, very like emotionally stable, and also just aware of his emotions, and is
Yeah.
able to express himself very easily.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it kind of easy to be in an interracial relationship. With respect to like living in New Orleans,
Yeah.
I think it was something we both didn't expect.
Yeah.
I didn't know too much about the city, prior to moving. You see things on TV, you know a little bit about it. I'd been a few times prior to the decision to like move.
Right.
It's tough. It's tough. It's there's definitely a lot of tension in the way that it's not in like DC and Maryland, because there's so much gentrification happening,
Right.
especially post Katrina, a lot of people coming in, a lot of disaster capitalism,
Yeah.
a lot of displacement of Black people
Yeah.
in neighborhoods that used to be autonomously Black.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for us, it's just constantly recognizing our role as transplants and trying to, in some way, give back to the communities that we're taking space in,
Yeah.
and just realizing that we're taking up space. Mike's presence in, a predominantly Black neighborhood, which is where we live now,
Right.
whether I can sugarcoat it as much as I want to, but it's gentrification,
Mhm. Mhm.
and we are gentrifying a neighborhood.
Mhm.
And I think just being able to acknowledge those things, and again, it just goes back to being respectful and, being aware and constantly kind of checking in and checking ourselves and checking our privilege.
Yeah.
It's not fun, but it's a process. And if you actually care about the movement and just Black people in general, like that's what you have to do. And
Right.
it's a bitter pill to take, but
Yeah.
it's life.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have it any other way. Like I have an amazing partner who listens to me and encourages me and thinks I'm, everything. And I've never had that before with
Yeah.
anybody of any race or gender.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's beautiful. One last thing before we wrap up. I
Mhm.
want to ask you your top 5 self-care tips as you
Mm.
continue to navigate through your healing and your art and your marriage and your relationships. What are your top 5 self-care tips for our listeners?
One, I would say respect the process. Whether you're going through something, you're, literally have like a project with like that's a process, like
Right.
respect the process, be patient with it, don't rush things. Two, I would say listen to your body.
Mm-hmm.
Your intuition is an amazing thing. And American culture kind of prides this idea of just, nose to the grindstone, working all the time. I didn't sleep last night. I, slept only 1 hour last night. And so, obviously because I'm working so hard and stressing myself out so much, I'm going to get there. Like,
Not healthy.
not healthy. Like, listen to yourself. If you need to take a break, take a break.
Yes.
If you're falling asleep in front of the sewing machine, go to sleep.
Yep.
That's for me. Um, I would say number 3 would be therapy. Therapy. That is like a big one for me. Black people, especially, we have the stigma when it comes to mental illnesses and specifically like depression, especially, Black community, African community a lot. There are resources out there for people who, don't have insurance, are worried about the price of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many resources out there that you can find, Google is your friend, to find a therapist that will either work with you on a payment plan or even some pro bono work.
Yeah.
It's something that I feel like it's not just self-care, like it's almost like it's saving your life.
Yeah.
Like therapy literally saved my life.
Self-preservation.
Self-preservation, yes, that is it. That is it. Number 4 would be for me personally, and I feel like a lot of people could relate to this, cooking a really good meal, cooking a really beautiful home-cooked meal.
Just to interject here, Denisio taught me how
Yes.
to cook, so shout out to her.
You've like surpassed me now in the fanciness. I saw something the other day. I was like, "Oh, girl, like, oh my goodness." I'm so proud. I'm over here being proud mama. But yeah, there's something about the process of like making food and making a meal for yourself that feels very special and intimate and just the ultimate kind of self-care, ritual. When I'm really stressed out or I'm upset, like I cook. And it's something that I can do for myself. I can do for other people to show them I love them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say a meal. And then number 5 is something that I'm kind of realizing kind of recently with, talking with other friends about this, whole self-care movement and stuff, is just being aware of when sometimes working can be a form of self-care.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think for me and my depression and like suffering with depression, I think sometimes I get very wrapped up in this idea that I need to kind of retreat
Mm.
and lay down and be in bed and kind of have the covers over my head.
Yeah.
And, it's okay that I'm doing that because that's self-care.
Right.
But kind of, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's sometimes you need that, but then sometimes it's good to kind of get up and,
Get active, do
get out,
something.
do
Mm-hmm.
something,
Mm-hmm.
work on something, write something, sketch something. So sometimes that productivity can actually be a form of self-care and just keeping your mind busy and also keeping yourself in the present moment
Yeah.
and being aware of that. Because I think present moment and kind of awareness of that is a way of kind of getting your mind out of that, mind projected future and past and thinking
Yeah.
of all these things that don't ultimately affect your present moment.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I love you.
I love you too, and thank you for like asking me to be a part of this. I'm so excited about this new endeavor. Like
Thank
this is
you.
amazing.
I'm so excited too. So
Aw.
I'll let you go.
Okay.
But before I do that, let the people know where they can find you on the internet.
On the internets, you can find me on Instagram, my full name Denisio Truitt at Denisio Truitt. My company's name is Dopeciety. You can find that at dopeciety.com, DOPECIETY.com. Yeah, I'm just on there. Most of my handles are just my first and last name because I'm not creative at all. So with names.
And you have the best name, so it's fine. Okay,
Thank
sis,
you.
I'm gonna let you go. It was good talking to
Okay.
you.
Great talking to you too.
Bye. Love you.
Bye. Love you too.
Hey Girl is a member of the District Productive Network. Produced by Jamie Benson and me, Alex Elle. Music provided by DC's own Kokai.